Ever since I saw the Compadre Mini on a UK website, I decided that I wanted one because I could see the possibilities where these would come in real handy here in the States. Um, I'd talked to Tesoro once about repairing one of my metal detectors, and when I had him on the phone, I asked him about the Mini. Why can you just send me a Mini? But they're only for sale in the UK. They're only for the UK market. And even though they're just a chopped down Compadre, they're still the same price as a Compadre. And you would have to have it shipped from the UK over here, and that would be pretty costly. So I'd seen a homemade one here locally, and I played with it and used it at a dump site, and it was real handy for doing a dump. When we were bottle digging, I could just turn around and scan the tailings piles with it without having to hold a full length detector. And I thought they might be cool, like underneath an old porch, or maybe the crawl space under a old house, or even thick underbrush maybe, for the Civil War sites. I've been on some that were really thick with underbrush, and people stayed away from that, so it might help get in there where someone else has missed. But anyway, I really didn't want to cut up a Compadre, just buy one and chop it up. So I've been saving up some parts, and this is what I've got. I ended up with a completely extra Stingray pole. This is the Stingray pole for my Stingray, and my Stingray is on a dive pole setup. This pole belonged to another Stingray I had that I sent in for repair that couldn't be repaired, so they sent me back a sand shark. So this pole is completely extra. So I got a Compadre, and it's pretty self-explanatory when you look up these mini Compadres what has to be done. You basically chop off the arm cuff and cut it down here, cut this short and put it back together. But the minis have a 4-inch coil. So even if you just bought a Compadre used and just decided, well, I'm just going to chop this up, well, you could do that, but then you still have to buy a 4-inch coil if you want it to be like the UK version. And that was one of the drawbacks, that I didn't want to buy a 4-inch coil, cut the cable, and buy a Compadre and chop it up. So I ended up, a friend of mine gave me this 4-inch coil. It's beat up, and it was broke right here, and I figured, well, for this project, you're not going to have a lot of leverage. You're not going to be swinging this thing super hard, so epoxy should hold it. It's still a good coil, just that was broke. And I took this second Stingray shaft and decided to make some measurements and cut it up. And that way, I still had my original Stingray shaft. When this Compadre is converted to a Mini, I will still have its factory shaft. You can keep the original coil, even though that's the most complicated part of this project, is unsoldering this from the inside and then cutting this wire and resoldering it. I know you have to be careful because the homemade one I saw here in town had to be sent in for repair because somebody got it too hot and it messed up the potentiometer up here, and so the discrimination didn't work right. So I know we got to be careful with that. But when I unsolder this, I can fix this end, clean it up, and I can solder it onto here and have a spare 5.75-inch coil. And then this one's going to get cut down so we don't have so much extra cable. So what I did was I took some measurements. These things are about 14 inches overall. I've already done some cutting, so I'm kind of behind in the video because I wasn't sure how this was going to work out. But basically you can see this is the Stingray pole I had. And I'd cut this section twice so that I could get the spring clip out. And because there's no sense in wasting it, we might need this someday, so we're keeping that. So I'd cut this section out, and that left me with this and the arm cuff. The arm cuff on this machine it looked like somebody melted it in a trunk of a car, and it was folded up. So, I kept the screws and I kept the other half that was good and basically chunked it. And then I put this on a bandsaw with a metal blade and just cut it right here. So now we have our handle on this particular rod, this end on this one, as you can see, was worn completely out. This thing right here, the plastic insert, just shook. So you basically, if you're doing this with a Stingray pole, which you may not be, you probably be using one of these, but you just push this button and this slides out. And then I basically just measured and cut me a piece so that when this went in here, it didn't hit the screw. This is where the screw will be for the control housing. It'll go here. So you got to make sure that this don't hit it. So I left enough on that. And I basically just measured this, drilled a new hole, and you tap this back in. And now this piece is good and tight, and we don't really need that. It's wore out. We don't need... I'd cut this in a few separate pieces, just getting the length right. And so we're not going to be using that stuff. And so that's about all there was to cutting this. One thing is I had a spare... I'd ordered several of these spare wing bolt kits. So, as you know, these newer ones are wider or larger in diameter, so you have to drill the coil out carefully. I haven't done that yet. And you have to drill this out. So I've already done that. Because the Stingray has the old metal bolt that's smaller in diameter. So the next phase of this will be pretty much taking the housing off and opening it up and unsoldering this, and then getting this cable done, which I'll probably do some of that on video. This right here, I've already gotten all this. I mean, the rod was the easy part. One thing you have to do is you'll probably end up re-drilling some of this for the spring clip, and I don't really know how to make exactly sure you're drilling center. All I know is if you don't get it right when you hold your machine, your coil's going to be cocked left or right, so you got to make dang sure you get those, I don't know, parallel or whatever with the handle. But since this one's such a short project, you can eyeball it on the drill press, which is what I did, and I think I got it right. So there's our handle. Next we'll make sure this is centered and drill this hole. And then we'll get to doing some wiring, which is the most complicated part of this project, I think. The most critical part that you got to really be careful when you get inside these machines. Is it going to void the warranty? Well, yeah, but at least these are only, you can get these used all day long for at least, I mean, minimum 110, maybe. Brand new, you can just buy them brand new for $169, I think, shipped. But if you shop around, you can get them for around 110. And I think I've seen them as cheap as $100 if you just wanted to buy one and chop it up. But I made a trade for this one in a package deal, so I don't really have anything in this Compadre. I have nothing in the coil but some epoxy, and I had this absolutely extra, have no use for it, Stingray pole set. So I'm getting out pretty good here, and I'm going to end up with a nice mini Compadre, I think. So anyway, I'll start taking this apart and I'll get back to you. Okay, most of you probably know how to take a coil plug apart, but just in case, I'm just going to show you real quick what I figured out. It's hard to do this one-handed. I don't have anybody to hold the camera, but that notch right there, when this is pushed all the way in, the plug, there's a little tab in there. You just push down with a small screwdriver and push that forward. Now this strain relief on this one's been pulled out. So when I unsolder this, I'm going to take this off and put it back down there and snap it in where it goes. So that's why this is loose. I mean, this coil's been around the block. And so we'll end up taking this down, opening these crimps up, and then I'm going to write down the pin out on this and unsolder this carefully. And then we'll shorten this cable and get it ready to go in here. And one thing, the issue I'm worried about now is this strain relief is made for this 5 3/4 inch coil, And the wire these days, the cable is bigger in diameter than these. So we may have some kind of, this may get a little bit loose right here. This may be a little funky. But since it is a kind of a Frankenstein project, I don't think it'll be super critical. But when we get that far, we'll find out. When you're changing these older coils to the newer wing bolt and wing nut, you have to drill the ears out. And pretty much, you have to drill these out for older rods. And if you re-drill your holes for your push pins, your spring clips, everything's 1/4 inch. It's a 1/4 inch drill that I use. It's not exactly quarter, but quarter's what works. I don't know what other bit would be closer, but I think it's, I mean, 1/4 is what you're going to be using. So when I drill these out, I'm just real careful about it so that the drill don't grab and break a tab, especially on a coil that ain't been broke yet. If it did something to this, well, I've already epoxied it, it's no big deal, but I'd rather not re-epoxy it. So I'm going to drill this out real quick, and we'll get started on the next step. Now I know there's a mathematical way of getting centers on tubing and all that stuff, but since this is so short and it's not too awful critical, I basically just eyeball this to make sure that when I drill this hole it's centered, and that when the control housing's mounted it ain't cocked left or right. And I went ahead and used a center punch to start that so this didn't wobble too much. So we're just going to drill this out for the control housing. So now we got our hole ready for mounting this. Lines up with the screw in the original. Okay, this is just a quick mock-up. I got this drilled for the bigger wing bolt that we now use on Tesoros, and I drilled this hole and mounted this just to give us an idea of, you know, what this is going to be like. So now the critical part will be to open this up and do the soldering, which is the only part that I'm apprehensive about. So we'll get back to you. It's been a few days and I've been tinkering with this Compadre project, so some things have changed. Number one, this 4-inch coil that was all beat to hell that I was given is actually not any good. It's real erratic, so it's probably got a bad shielding problem. I'm guessing the wires broke here. So that's not going to work. So I got to come up with another one of these. But one thing I decided to do is, while I'm hunting down a new 4-inch coil, to make things easier, I'm going to go ahead and convert this Compadre to the interchangeable coil setup. So I've ordered a couple of the factory parts. This is the one for the coil cable, and this is the one that goes here, and that serves two purposes. One, if the coil's interchangeable, then if we have two poles, the short one and the full-length factory, then you can unscrew the cable and it's just one screw to change it from this to the short pole or back to a long pole, and you can put any coil you want on it. And you could even leave your little short coil. When I get it, I can just leave it on here and just unplug it. And the second thing that does is, I know earlier in the video I mentioned that I knew a guy that had a homemade mini Compadre, and he had to send it back to Tesoro because somebody had gotten what I thought they said the potentiometer got too hot when they were soldering. But I don't know why they would have been soldering up there, because if you pull this open, and for those that don't know, it's just two screws in the front, and this comes out. The coil wires they're soldered back here, so I don't know why anybody would be soldering up front. So either I misunderstood or they got something back here too hot. But if you're using this, you don't have to solder on your board. You don't have to get any heat around here, because you can get in here and cut this loose, put this in here, and now you're doing a soldering to the back of this, and you don't have to monkey with your board. I think the only thing I read on the internet was that this hole's not big enough for this, so this will have to be enlarged. So I'll figure that out, because I want to do a real nice job. I don't want to just Dremel tool that out. So I might make something so I can use an actual bit that size and make sure it's straight. So real quick, I don't want this video to get super long, but if you're going to convert this part right here is getting harder to find. Everybody wants to sell it in bulk. So finding a single one is kind of tough, because everybody that sells singles are back ordered. So I got this one on eBay, and this is a Switchcraft SL405MX. And then this part, this one's easy to find. You can get this from Mouser and some other places on the internet. And that is the Switchcraft SL405MX. I think that's a 0. My handwriting is terrible. And on the new cables, for those, you can find this on the internet. That's how I figured it out. The pin out on the new cable is orange is pin 1, black is pin 5, gray is pin 4, purple pin 3, pin 2 is never used. And on this, like this older coil, the wire colors are different, but with the plug open, you can see that red is pin 1, pin 5 uses a bare wire, and pin 4 is white, pin 3 is green. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to figure out how to get this hole larger and make it nice and neat. I'm going to get this soldered in, and then I'm going to take the strain relief off and strip me off some new cable and put the end on it, and I'm going to get this all put back together so this Compadre will have interchangeable coils. And as I come up with another 4-inch coil, I'll get back to work on this and see if I can't get this little mini Compadre finished. On this, on these plugs, it's a pretty straightforward project, but it's just tedious. So I got me one of these things that I'd gotten at a yard sale. It seems to help a lot if you don't have an extra hand to help hold this stuff, because you can see it's small. So it's straightforward. Just follow the pin out. You can get it from the internet, or you can write down what I had said earlier, and then just be real easy about soldering these so you don't accidentally get a stray wire going from one connection to the other, or get a big blob of solder that ends up shorting 2 of these terminals together. But if you take your time, it's easy enough to fill these new pins in and keep it neat. It's like I said, it's tedious. So now I'm going to work on the plug that goes in the control housing and see if I can get that to go in there without any issues. One thing that is critical about this project, the part that I was worried the most about, is enlarging this hole, because the strain relief is not as big as this. So I mean, you can take a Dremel tool and just keep watering this out until it's big enough for this to go in, but I want a hole that's perfect, or as perfect as I can get it. So I found a hole saw that I had that happens to fit. This is the washer for this, so we know this hole saw fits in there. But you can't, and yes, I know this is backwards, but I don't have this arbor for this thing. But anyway, whether I had the arbor or not, it still wouldn't, you still couldn't just set it up here and drill you a new hole, because this is already drilled. So this thing is just going to walk everywhere and make a big mess. So what I did was I found another washer that's pretty thick, and I'm going to center this, and I'm going to tape it on here, and then that way that will act as a guide to keep this hole saw from watering all over the place. And I'm just going to tape this on here, and then I'll chuck this up in a hand drill, and I'll do this real carefully and just drill through this plastic with this washer being my guide, and that'll keep it from walking on me. So I'll turn the camera on when I get this done. If I had somebody to help me hold this camera or a tripod, then I'd let y'all watch me screw this up, but you're just gonna have to wait till we come back. Okay, real quick, I got this drilled out again, so probably just have to clean it up with an X-Acto knife. Take this tape off, see how that worked. So it made that made a pretty nice clean hole right there. So a little clean up the little burrs, and that worked out pretty good. So I'll get this soldered in back here and just push it through, and then you get a washer, and it comes with a lock nut that I think's underneath. And you screw that on, and then this part will be done. So we'll get back to you. Okay, so I've got this soldered back up on the inside and got the control housing back together, and now it's got a factory plug, so I can use interchangeable coils. Got the new plug on this, got it put together. I tested everything before I put the crimp on, and before I tightened everything up, and everything's good, nothing's erratic, so I think I did it right. I just followed the pin out real carefully, and now I'm just going to put this back together and use this until I can come up with another 4-inch coil, and then we'll go back to working on the Compadre Mini. Okay, as y'all know, this coil was bad, so I had to come up with another one. Luckily my friend had another one. It's got some cracks in it, but it ain't going to matter for this because we're not taking big swings. Nothing's going to break this little thing. But I am going to go ahead and put some epoxy on it just in case. But it's all finished now. I was going to cut this cable down, but there's really no need to because it wrapped up real nice. And we've already checked it. Everything's good. It doesn't false. I mean, there's stuff in here, but so we got this done. We're gonna put some epoxy on this, and then we'll show you some uses for the Mini Compadre. Screwdriver, this one's for real. Ooh. Damn. First coin with the Mini Compadre.